Okay, let's unpack this. We have a stack of source material today that forces us to tackle perhaps the most fundamental question about human existence. Are we, the modern civilization of iPhones and space telescopes, the first ones to achieve technological and architectural sophistication on this planet?
It's a compelling question, absolutely, but also a deeply controversial one. The accepted historical timeline, the one that officially places the start of recorded history and organized civilization around, 2500 BCE?
Right.
Well, it simply cannot account for the anomalies in our sources today. They suggest that narrative is profoundly incomplete. It's like we only have a partial transcript of a much, much older story.
Exactly. The premise we're exploring today is truly shocking, really. It suggests that a highly sophisticated, technologically advanced civilization existed thousands of years before the first pharaohs, before the first Mesopotamian cities.
And that this entire golden age was wiped clean, just gone, erased by a global catastrophe, leaving only these, impossible remnants behind.
Yeah, and we're trying to ground these theories, these ideas of lost civilizations, in hard data, in physics, geology, and some pretty intricate astronomy.
Our mission today is really to guide you through these challenging anomalies. We're combining deep-sea marine archaeology, some controversial geological dating techniques, and sophisticated celestial mechanics to look at three key pieces of evidence.
Three pieces that just refuse to fit the standard textbook narrative of history.
Precisely.
We start far beneath the ocean surface, exploring a massive, structured city discovered off the coast of Cuba. It's mind-boggling.
And we travel thousands of miles, right, to look at an astronomical pattern, one that seems to link an artifact found in Ecuador directly to the layout of the Giza pyramids.
And finally, we use geological proof to argue that the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years older than conventional archaeology claims.
So if these anomalies are real, and the evidence seems to point that way, we aren't just adjusting the history books a little bit.
No, it feels like we're starting over completely. Let's start with this incredible maritime mystery, the Cuban anomaly. For you listening, try to picture this scene. It's the summer of 2001. You've got a Canadian marine engineer, Paulina Zaleski, and her colleague, Paul Winsweg.
Right. They're operating a research vessel off the Guanahacabibes Peninsula. That's the really remote western coast of Cuba.
And their company, Advanced Digital Communications, wasn't looking for ancient ruins at all, were they?
No, not even close. They were contracted for a pretty routine job.
Yeah.
Sonar mapping the seafloor. It was a partnership with the Cuban government.
So for weeks, it was just the usual.
Yeah, the usual monotony you'd expect at sea, really. Flat sand, layers of sediment, maybe the occasional deep-sea canyon, standard seabed stuff.
But then Zalitsky noticed something on the sonar returns, something that just instantly shattered the routine.
The equipment started picking up these distinct, highly unnatural geometric shapes right there on the bottom of the ocean.
And this wasn't just a jumble of rocks or some weird reef formation.
No, absolutely not. The sources indicate these formations covered a massive area, approximately 2 square kilometers. And they weren't random. They seemed arranged in a structured, organized grid pattern.
Okay, so the first reaction must have been, is the equipment glitching?
Understandably, yeah. Skepticism. Sonar data can be tricky. It can produce acoustic illusions or what they call ghost images.
Right.
But Zalipsky and her team processed the data again and again, and the regularity just persisted. The shapes were too distinct, too angular, too organized to just be dismissed as, natural geology.
And the scale. The sources mention immense structures.
Immense is right. The sonar indicated the presence of vast rectangular blocks and what looked very strongly like stepped pyramids. Some of these structures were indicated to be maybe up to 400 meters long.
400 meters? That's nearly a quarter mile.
Exactly, and maybe 40 meters high. But here is the central, absolutely crucial mystery, the thing that makes this whole discovery so controversial. The depth. These formations were recorded lying between 600 and 750 meters below the surface.
600 meters. Just let that sink in. That's roughly half a mile down.
Yeah. I mean, no known civilization in the accepted historical record, even thinking about land exposed during the lowest sea levels of the last ice age, would have built anything that far down.
So even if they built it on dry land?
The entire Caribbean basin would have had to sink dramatically, catastrophically maybe, since the construction date.
Okay, so they have the sonar data, which is compelling, but they needed eyes on it, right? They needed visual confirmation.
Exactly. So they returned a few months later, this time with a specialized remote-operated vehicle, an ROV. One of those underwater robots equipped with powerful lights and cameras designed for deep sea work.
The descent must have been tense, down into that blackness.
Agonizingly slow, I'd imagine. At that depth, the water is utterly black, it's freezing cold, and the pressure is just immense.
But when the ROV finally reached the target area,
the cameras captured something extraordinary. Huge, light-colored, smooth-cut stone blocks. These were clearly not naturally eroded rocks, not rough geological feature.
like stone, half a mile down.
Yes. The dimensions varied, mostly between 2 and 5 meters in size, and crucially, they were shaped rectangular, circular, and those stepped pyramid shapes Zalitsky saw on the sonar
We saw them.
confirmed visually. It wasn't just construction, it showed intentional design. There was structure.
And there was something else, wasn't there? Something about inscriptions.
Reportedly, yes. One of the Cuban archaeologists on the team noted what looked like symbols or inscriptions etched onto the surfaces of some of the smoother stones.
Which would suggest
A written or symbolic language. That's the smoking gun, really, suggesting this was indeed the ruins of a complex, maybe even sprawling city.
So Zalitsky tries to date it initially. She suggests maybe 6,000 years old, trying to fit it into known history somehow.
Yeah, she tried, maybe connecting it to, Bronze Age cultures or Mesopotamia, but that estimate immediately crashed headlong into that geological wall, the 600-meter depth.
Right, which is where the geologist comes in.
Manuel Iturralde Vinant, a marine geologist from the Cuban National Museum. He provided the scientific counterpoint, and it was pretty definitive.
What did he say?
He stated unequivocally, based on geology, that for the seafloor to sink 600 meters in just 6,000 years is, well, it's seismologically and tectonically impossible.
Impossible. Why so certain?
Based on the known tectonic activity, the really slow rate of plate movement in the Caribbean basin, he calculated it would take approximately 50,000 years for that specific stretch of ocean floor to subside that much.
50,000 years.
Yeah, and that calculation just blows everything up. It pushes the potential age of the structure way, way past anything we traditionally accept as organized human civilization, potentially into the Paleolithic era.
50,000 years ago, humans were supposed to be, what, hunter-gatherers, migrating out of Africa, living in caves.
Certainly not building megalithic cities out of quarried stone. And the material itself added an even stranger layer to the mystery.
You mean the granite?
Exactly. Zalitsky's initial analysis suggested the blocks were granite. Now, the immediate problem there is that the western Cuban seafloor, the bedrock, it's primarily limestone and sediment.
So, no local granite at all.
None whatsoever, which means if the blocks were granite, where did they come from?
Okay, where's the nearest source?
Central Mexico, hundreds of kilometers away, across open water.
So, wait. This implies the builders could not only quarry and cut multi-ton granite blocks,
but they also had the logistical and engineering capability to transport these massive materials across vast stretches of water to the Cuban site.
that level of organization, that kind of maritime capability, it's completely missing from the accepted record 50,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago.
It's a level of sophistication that just doesn't fit. It speaks to a highly organized, maritime-capable culture.
It's astonishing. That's a logistical feat that would challenge modern infrastructure, frankly, and we're talking about a pre-ceramic culture that shouldn't even exist according to the books.
And there was more. The sources mention another bizarre finding. Samples of volcanic rock and volcanic glass were apparently extracted from the area, too.
Volcanic glass. But Cuba doesn't have active volcanoes.
Correct. It forms when lava cools rapidly, usually in air or water. But Cuba hasn't had recorded volcanic activity during the entire known human historical period. So, again, the geological puzzle pieces just don't fit the established picture of the region.
Unsurprisingly, the reaction from the mainstream scientific community was skeptical.
Intense skepticism is probably fair. They really prioritize the known geological facts over the, admittedly unverified by others, sonar footage and ROV images.
The sources mentioned Robert Ballard, the guy who found the Titanic.
Yeah, the renowned oceanographer. He apparently stated he wasn't convinced. He suggested the regularity of the shapes could be a highly unusual but purely natural geological formation, like natural jointing in rock.
And others were even more direct.
Alistair Miller from the British Geological Survey, BGS, he was quoted calling the proposed subsidence rate 650 meters and 6,000 years geologically unbelievable. So the focus immediately shifted entirely onto the geological constraints, effectively dismissing the architectural implications of what the ROV supposedly filmed.
Yet, despite that skepticism, the potential was just too huge to ignore completely, right? National Geographic got involved.
Initially, yes. National Geographic planned a major, well-funded follow-up investigation. This was supposed to happen in 2003 using a manned submersible and involving Dr. Sylvia Earle, one of the world's most famous oceanographers. This looked like it would be the moment of truth.
Oh, it didn't happen.
The dive never successfully occurred. It got plagued by perpetual delays. They cited logistics, funding struggles, vaguely described technical challenges.
And Zalitsky's team tried again.
They reported another failure to return to the site in 2004, again due to equipment issues. And after that, well, the site essentially vanished from active scientific inquiry.
Vanished. And this is a really critical point for you listening. Over 2 decades have passed since that initial discovery, and no independent, scientifically recognized team has successfully visited, verified, or definitively debunked the Cuban anomaly.
It just hangs there, an unresolved archaeological mystery stuck entirely in limbo.
So we have to ask the question, why? Why would a site that could potentially rewrite human history, a site showing massive cut granite blocks half a mile beneath the sea, just get shelved?
It's a fair question. If you look at other accepted sunken cities, they're usually found in relatively shallow water.
Like Dwarka in India,
Yeah.
or Pavlopetri in Greece.
Exactly. Dwarka's at about 20 meters deep, Pavlopetri only 5 meters. These are accepted because known relatively slight sea level changes over millennia can easily account for their depth. They fit the model.
But 600 to 750 meters.
That puts the Cuban anomaly into a completely different category. For that city to exist there, it demands one of two things. Either our understanding of plate tectonics in the Caribbean is profoundly wrong, or that a sudden, massive, civilization-destroying geological event occurred. And frankly, the established scientific community often finds the latter scenario, the catastrophe model, harder to accept than finding flaws in the data.
And the location itself, right?
Yeah.
In the Atlantic, near where Plato supposedly placed Atlantis.
It lends immediate, maybe uncomfortable credence to those old myths. It puts the site right in the center of that whole story.
Plus the local Mayan connection.
Right. The Mayan people of Yucatan, just 160 kilometers away from the Guanajuato Peninsula, they have these oral traditions of an island called Atlantico, meaning the place where our good father rests.
Could the Cuban structures be the actual physical source of that enduring myth? Something real that was catastrophically submerged?
It's certainly possible, but the frustrating answer is, until a comprehensive, properly funded, independent, manned expedition occurs, we simply don't know. And history remains stubbornly incomplete.
Okay, so now we leave the deep, dark, and politically complicated waters of the Caribbean.
Right.
We're moving thousands of miles east to the hyper-arid desert of Egypt.
Right. To the officially sanctioned history surrounding the most famous monuments on Earth, the Giza Plateau.
And here, we're going to challenge the dating. The official story, the one everyone learns.
It's the bedrock of modern Egyptology, really. The Great Pyramid was built by the pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BCE, intended as his tomb. This date is basically the chronological starting gun for what we call high civilization.
Yet there's a collection of hard physical evidence, stuff gathered since, the late 20th century, that strongly suggests this timeline is off, maybe way off, by thousands of years.
Thousands, yeah. Let's start with the most visually arresting piece of evidence. It focuses on perhaps the oldest, certainly the most mysterious part of the complex, the Great Sphinx.
John Anthony West, right?
Right.
He really brought attention to this anomaly back in the 90s.
He did. He was examining the massive limestone enclosure walls that surround the Sphinx, the ditch it sits in, essentially. And he observed clear and severe signs of weathering, heavy erosion.
But he realized this wasn't the kind of damage you'd expect in a desert environment.
Exactly. In a desert, you expect wind and sand erosion, right? Aeolian erosion. That creates horizontal, abrasive layers of damage, usually worse near the ground where the sand blows.
But the damage on the Sphinx enclosure walls was totally different.
Completely different. It was vertical weathering, deep, undulating fissures carving vertically down into the limestone bedrock. This pattern, hydroabrasion, it's characteristic of sustained, heavy exposure to flowing water.
Specifically, long periods of torrential rainfall.
Torrential rainfall. And here's the crucial geological contradiction. Egypt has been a hyper-arid desert for at least the last 5,000 years.
So for the Sphinx enclosure to get that kind of deep vertical water erosion,
it must have been exposed to centuries of heavy rain and probably flood conditions that just haven't existed there for millennia.
When was the last time that region saw that kind of rainfall?
Well, geological records are pretty specific on this. The last time the Nile Valley region experienced a pluvial period, a really wet period, capable of producing that kind of heavy rainfall was during the pre-Holocene epoch, meaning over 7,000 years ago, and likely closer to 10,000 years ago, maybe even earlier.
Okay, so West wasn't a geologist. He brought in an expert to verify this, right? Dr. Robert Schoch.
Yes, from Boston University. And Schoch initially was a skeptic. He went there expecting to debunk West's idea, but he applied rigorous geological methodology.
And what did his analysis confirm?
Schoch analyzed the specific geological strata, the different layers of softer limestone and harder shale that make up the Sphinx and its enclosure. He confirmed unequivocally that the erosion patterns were undeniably caused by water, not wind.
And he noted something about the Sphinx's head, too, didn't he?
He did. He noted that the head, which famously appears disproportionately small compared to the massive lion body, is carved out of a harder, less weathered layer of limestone. Suggesting it may have been recarved, probably by dynastic Egyptians, from a structure that was already thousands of years old and heavily weathered by rain. They might have reshaped an older, eroded head.
The implication is just massive. The Sphinx predates the dynastic Egyptians.
By potentially thousands of years. It suggests it was already a vast, ancient monument when Khufu's people supposedly arrived on the scene, making it potentially 7,000, 8,000, maybe even 10,000 years old or more.
But it's not just the Sphinx, is it? The Great Pyramid itself seems to hold clues pointing to a much older date related to ancient sea levels.
That's another fascinating line of evidence. Researchers have reported finding ocean-deposited seashells. Now, importantly, these are not fossilized seashells that are naturally part of the limestone bedrock.
Right, these are different.
These are relatively recent shells, the kind you'd find on a beach, deposited by moving ocean water. And they've been found embedded within the pyramid's lower courses, several meters above the current base level of the pyramid.
Okay, that's a huge problem for the 2500 BCE timeline. For those shells to get deposited on the pyramid, several meters up.
Sea levels must have been drastically higher, much higher than they are today, or were in 2500 BC.
How high are we talking?
We're talking about sea levels high enough for ocean waves to literally crash against the pyramid's base, several meters up its flanks.
And when geologists look at the global records for sea levels being that high,
they point to a specific period, the end of the last ice age. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, specifically events like Meltwater Pulse 1A,
which was caused by
continental ice sheets melting rapidly, pouring vast amounts of water into the oceans, causing sudden, dramatic rises in sea levels worldwide.
So, once again, the physical evidence, the water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, the sea level implications from the shells on the pyramid, it keeps pushing the construction date back towards that 10,000 BCE era, miles away from 2500 BCE.
It's a consistent pattern emerging from different kinds of physical evidence. Now let's look inside the pyramid itself, specifically regarding its supposed purpose as a tomb for Khufu.
Because the interior raises some profound questions too, doesn't it?
It really does. The king's chamber, the queen's chamber, the grand gallery, the entire upper structure is almost entirely bare. It's devoid of the inscriptions or religious texts you'd expect.
And why is that absence so crucial in the Egyptian context? Why is that weird?
Because practically every other Egyptian royal tomb ever found, from the earliest dynasties right through the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, is meticulously decorated.
With what kind of tests?
With pyramid texts, coffin texts, books of the dead, spells and guides meant to ensure the pharaoh's safe passage through the duat, the underworld, and into the afterlife. This decoration wasn't optional. It was the entire ritualistic point of the structure.
So the question is, why would the largest, most technologically complex structure ever built by dynastic Egyptians, designed supposedly for their greatest pharaoh Khufu, be completely bare inside?
It strongly suggests it might have been built for a profoundly different purpose, something non-funerary, something else entirely.
And the actual evidence linking the pyramid directly to Khufu?
Yeah.
It's surprisingly thin, isn't it?
Yeah.
And highly contested.
Extremely thin and, yes, highly contested. The sole definitive link is one single cartouche, basically a royal seal bearing Khufu's name. And it wasn't found in the main chambers.
Where was it found?
It was found in a small, cramped relief chamber, high above the king's chamber. These chambers seem more structural, maybe to relieve pressure, not ceremonial spaces.
And this cartouche was discovered when?
In 1837 by Colonel Howard Weiss. a British explorer and archaeologist known for his, let's say, aggressive and sometimes destructive excavation methods, often using gunpowder.
Right. And what was Weiss's situation at the time he made this crucial discovery?
Well, reports suggest Weiss was under immense pressure. He'd spent a fortune of his own money, years of searching inside the pyramid with little to show for it, and his funding was apparently about to run out. He desperately needed a major find.
So some researchers suspect.
Researchers like Zakaria Sitchin, who examined the circumstances and even the paint used, have argued that the cartouche looked suspiciously fresh. They suggested that Weiss, facing failure, may have actually forged the inscription himself to secure his place in history and justify his massive expenditure.
Wow. So whether it was a deliberate forgery or not, the fact remains.
The fact remains. The entire official dating of the Great Pyramid, this colossal monument, rests almost entirely on one disputed inscription found in an obscure, non-central, basically inaccessible location.
The lack of other contemporary documentation, architectural evidence directly connecting this immense project to Khufu's reign, it's deafening, really.
It is profoundly lacking. So if the dynastic Egyptians didn't build it in 2500 BCE, who did they think built it? This takes us back to their own historical records.
Like the Turin King List.
Exactly. The Turin King List is this ancient papyrus. It details the rulers of Egypt. And yes, it certainly records the human pharaohs starting around 3000 BCE, Menes and onwards.
But the list doesn't start there, does it?
No, crucially it doesn't. Before the start of the human pharaohs, the list explicitly details a preceding era. An era of rule by gods and then semi-gods or demigods, often called the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus.
And how long did this pre-dynastic era supposedly last?
According to the Turin List, for over 30,000 years before the first human pharaoh. Now, Egyptologists usually dismiss this as mythology, symbolic reigns.
But what if it wasn't just myth?
What if it represented their actual state history? It could indicate that the dynastic Egyptians saw themselves not as the originators of civilization on the Nile, but as the inheritors. Inheritors of an advanced knowledge base established long, long before their dynasty began.
It suggests they acknowledged a lost golden age themselves.
Precisely. They acknowledged that something came before them, something powerful and ancient.
Okay, so the physical evidence in Egypt, the water erosion, the sea levels, the strangely empty tomb, it all keeps pointing towards this much earlier time frame, maybe around 10,000 BCE.
Right. And now we connect this time frame with some really startling astronomical precision. But to do that, we need to journey halfway around the world.
From Egypt all the way to a remote cave system in Ecuador.
Exactly. Back in the 1980s, a team was exploring a little-known cave system in the Ecuadorian highlands, the La Mana area. And they made this stunning find, something that suggests a kind of global interconnectedness in deep antiquity.
What did they find?
They found a small, apparently man-made artifact, a miniature stone pyramid. It stood only about 27 centimeters tall, so roughly a foot high.
And it was intricately carved.
Very intricately carved, yeah, with 13 distinct steps leading up to an inlaid eye symbol right at the top, like the eye on the US dollar bill, but much older.
A symbolic pyramid, thousands of miles from Egypt or Mexico. But the real secret wasn't just the shape, was it?
No, the real secret was hidden on its base. When they turned it over, the base contained 5 carefully carved points, or dots, meticulously arranged on the stone.
Not just random marks.
Definitely not random. When researchers analyzed the pattern formed by these 5 points, they realized they weren't decorative. They precisely matched the pattern of stars in the Orion constellation's belt.
Orion's belt. The 3 main stars.
Not just the 3 main stars. The pattern included 2 minor, much less visible stars near the belt as well. The precision, including these faint stars, suggested really advanced astronomical knowledge, not just casual stargazing.
Wow. And was there any writing on it?
Yes, apparently there was an inscription on the base as well, written in what's described as a pre-Sanskrit language. The translation given is, "The son of the creator is coming."
Okay, so let's recap. A small, highly symbolic pyramid found in a remote cave in Ecuador, containing a precise ancient astronomical map of Orion, coupled with some kind of prophetic message.
That's the object. Now we have to ask, what makes that specific star pattern, Orion's belt, so incredibly important in this context?
The Giza connection.
The 12,000-kilometer coincidence, as some call it. That exact star pattern of Orion's belt is famously, or perhaps infamously, depending on your perspective, mirrored in the ground alignment of the 3 main pyramids on the Giza Plateau in Egypt.
So the same celestial blueprint, seemingly showing up in Ecuador and Egypt.
Yes. a connection across two continents separated by vast oceans and conventionally separated by thousands of years of cultural difference. Mainstream archaeology tends to dismiss this as pure coincidence. Maybe pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist.
But the sheer precision involved, both in the artifact and at Giza, argues against pure chance, doesn't it?
It really does, and the precision at Giza is just astounding, even if you set aside the constellation theory for a moment. Think about the Great Pyramid's alignment.
It's aligned to true north.
Yeah.
Right? Incredibly accurately.
With an extreme accuracy of only 0.05 degrees of error. That's more accurate than many modern buildings achieve without GPS, and it's also located almost exactly at 30 degrees north latitude.
Which suggests
It suggests an incredibly advanced understanding of geodesy, of the Earth's shape and rotation. Global scale mathematical and engineering knowledge that simply shouldn't have been available to the dynastic Egyptians, using the tools they're typically credited with.
Okay, so that brings us to the Orion correlation theory itself, Robert Bauval's work.
Right. Bauval, who's a Belgian engineer, not an archaeologist by training, noted a crucial detail back in 1989, something that had long been overlooked when people looked at the layout of the three main Giza pyramids.
Which was?
They are not in a perfect straight line. The smallest pyramid, Menkaur's, is slightly offset to the east from the line created by the two larger ones, Khufu's and Khafre's.
It looks a bit like a kink in the line.
Exactly. And Bauval realized this offset wasn't random or sloppy building. It perfectly matched the differing brightness and the relative positions of the three stars that make up Orion's belt: Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Mintaka, the star corresponding to Menkaur's pyramid, is slightly offset and dimmer, just like the pyramid.
So this led him and his colleague, Adrian Gilbert, to formulate the Orion correlation theory.
Correct. Can I quickly explain the core idea for you?
Please do.
The theory posits that the entire Giza complex, including the Nile River nearby, acts as a kind of physical, scaled map of the sky, specifically the Orion constellation and the Milky Way, at a particular moment in time.
So the Nile represents the Milky Way.
Yes, running north-south alongside the pyramids, just as the Milky Way appears in the sky relative to Orion. The three main pyramids mark the positions of the three belt stars, but crucially, the sky isn't static.
Because of stellar precession.
Exactly. Because of the slow, observable wobble of the Earth's axis, a phenomenon known as stellar precession, the apparent position of the stars shifts very slowly over thousands of years.
Can you quickly explain why the stars seem to shift? Just the basics.
Sure. Imagine the Earth is like a spinning top. As a top spins, its axis doesn't stay perfectly vertical. It wobbles slowly in a circle. The Earth does the same thing. This wobble is precession.
And it takes a long time.
A very long time. About 26,000 years for the Earth's axis to complete one full cycle of this wobble. This means that the apparent position of constellations, especially where they rise on the horizon at sunrise, on key dates like the equinoxes, changes predictably over millennia.
Okay, so Bauval used this known, predictable rate of precession
to calculate exactly when the pyramid's positions on the ground would have perfectly mirrored the actual appearance of Orion's belt in the sky, specifically at its lowest point in its precessional cycle, which relates to the first time, or Zep Tepi, mentioned in Egyptian texts.
And the date he calculated.
He calculated that this perfect celestial alignment, where the ground plan at Giza precisely matched the pattern of Orion's belt at the moment of the spring equinox sunrise, occurred in 10,450 BCE.
10,450 BCE. There's that date again.
The convergence is just undeniable at this point. It's the same era suggested by the water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, the same era implied by the high sea levels needed to deposit those shells on the pyramid's base, and now the same era pinpointed by the astronomical positioning of the pyramids themselves.
Everything keeps converging on roughly 10,500 BCE.
And the astronomical confirmation goes even deeper, adding another layer of precision. Bauval and Gilbert also noted that at that exact date, 10,450 BCE, something else significant was happening in the sky at the moment of the spring equinox dawn.
Which was?
The constellation Leo the Lion was rising due east, marking the vernal point.
In which enormous monument at Giza, with the body of a lion, faces precisely due east, looking right at where Leo would have risen on the horizon in 10,450 BCE.
The Great Sphinx?
Wow.
The precision of the correlation, the three pyramids matching Orion's belt, the Nile matching the Milky Way, and the Sphinx facing its celestial counterpart Leo, all locking into the sky of 10,450 BCE, it's staggering.
It points away from the dynastic Egyptians who arrived much later and had different religious focuses, doesn't it?
It really does. It points towards a common, advanced origin of knowledge that seems to have existed during that deep prehistoric period. Knowledge that was perhaps shared across continents, as hinted at by that little pyramid in Ecuador also marking Orion.
But the skeptical argument here is often quite strong, isn't it? How do mainstream archaeologists typically dismiss this meticulous correlation? What's the counterargument?
Well, they often dismiss it as selective data interpretation, basically cherry picking, or confirmation bias, the human tendency to find patterns, especially in stars, where none are intended.
They say you could find other matches.
They argue that you're only matching 3 specific stars to 3 specific monuments, ignoring other stars and other monuments, and that by adjusting the date slightly or choosing different stars, you could probably find many apparent matches in the sky over millennia.
But that argument doesn't really address the other lines of evidence, does it? Like the water erosion.
No, it conveniently ignores the fact that the water erosion evidence and the sea level evidence independently point to the same time frame, completely separate from the stars.
Oh.
It forces the question, if the dynastic Egyptians didn't build these core structures in 2500 BCE, then what massive force was capable of ending the civilization that did apparently build them way back around 10,500 BCE?
Right. Where did they go? Okay, so if the evidence from the Cuban depths, the water erosion at Giza, the ancient sea levels, and this precise celestial alignment all converge on this timeline of roughly 10,500 BCE, we have to look for a definitive mechanism.
A cause. A global event that could explain why this apparently advanced civilization vanished, leaving only these giant enigmatic monuments behind.
This is where we move from the hard physical evidence to looking at geological mechanisms and maybe historical memory encoded in myth.
Exactly. And for centuries, Plato's account of Atlantis was largely dismissed by academia as pure myth. A philosophical allegory, perhaps.
But Plato was quite specific, wasn't he?
Very specific. He wrote about Atlantis, describing it as this incredibly advanced, morally upright maritime empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is usually taken to mean the Strait of Gibraltar.
And it was destroyed.
Destroyed catastrophically in a single day and night of misfortune, swallowed by the sea due to earthquakes and floods.
And crucially, Plato claimed the story didn't originate with him, right? He wasn't just making it up.
Correct. He claimed the story was passed down to him through his family from Solon, the Athenian statesman. And Solon, according to Plato, heard the story directly from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais.
And those priests gave a date for the destruction.
They did. They placed the destruction of Atlantis 9,000 years before Solon's time. Now, Solon lived around 600 BCE, Plato around 400 BCE. So 9,000 years before Solon puts the destruction right around 9,600 BCE.
Which is incredibly close to that 10,500 BCE window suggested by the Giza alignments in geology, almost a perfect match within the uncertainties.
It aligns remarkably well. And the memory of this kind of event wasn't just isolated to the Greeks or Egyptians, was it?
No, not at all. Think about the work of authors like Ignatius Donnelly way back in the 19th century. He highlighted the global ubiquity of flood myths.
That's right. It's astonishing when you look at it. Whether you look at Noah's Ark in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia with Utnapishtim, the deluge stories in the Hindu Puranas like Manu's flood, or the countless flood narratives found across North and South America among indigenous peoples.
Cultures separated by vast oceans, supposedly with no contact, all share this common, striking memory.
A memory of a singular, catastrophic, civilization-destroying flood. It strongly suggests a shared collective historical trauma, a real event imprinted on human memory worldwide.
And we mentioned the Mayan connection earlier. There are oral traditions of an island called Atlantico, meaning the place where our good father rests, just 160 kilometers from where that mysterious Cuban anomaly sits underwater.
It really hints that the catastrophe might have been both regional, perhaps centered in the Atlantic Caribbean, but also had global consequences, leading to worldwide flooding and upheaval. Could the Cuban site be the physical source of that enduring myth?
And what's truly fascinating now is that modern science, geology, climatology, actually provides a concrete, verifiable scientific event that perfectly matches these flood myths and that critical 10,500 BCE timeframe.
You're talking about the Younger Dryas event.
Exactly. Explain what the Younger Dryas event was for our listeners.
Okay, so scientists know from ice cores, lake sediments, ocean floor samples That between roughly 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, the Earth experienced this sharp, sudden, and really catastrophic return to near Ice Age conditions.
This is after a period of warming.
Yes, the Earth was warming up nicely after the last glacial maximum. Ice sheets were melting steadily, then boom. Temperatures abruptly plummeted worldwide, especially in the northern hemisphere. This period, the Younger Dryas stadial, lasted for over 1,000 years, about 1,200 years.
And it completely destabilized the climate and ecology.
Totally. Massive shifts in vegetation, animal extinctions like the mammoths and saber-toothed cats in North America. It was a period of intense environmental stress.
And what caused this sudden massive climate disruption? Why the abrupt deep freeze?
Well, the leading theory now, no, it's becoming much more mainstream. Researchers have identified a specific geological layer, often called the Younger Dryas boundary layer, or the black mat, found globally now from North America to Europe, the Middle East, even South America.
And this layer contains markers.
Clear evidence of an extraterrestrial impact event. Things like nanodiamonds formed under extreme pressure and heat, microscopic spherical carbon molecules called spherules, high concentrations of iridium and platinum, elements rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids and comets, and soot from widespread burning.
So we have a scientifically verifiable catastrophic mechanism, the comet impact around 12,900 years ago. It caused massive flooding, rapid sea level rise, abrupt climate change.
And the timing is the critical match. The Younger Dryas event timeline, starting around 12,900 years ago, ending around 11,700 years ago, perfectly brackets Plato's date for Atlantis, around 11,600 years ago, the Giza astronomical alignment date, 12,450 years ago, or 10,450 BCE, and the geological evidence for those high sea levels and the end of the rainy period that caused the Sphinx erosion. It all fits.
It provides the essential, necessary mechanism, the why. Why would an advanced civilization existing around 10,500 BCE suddenly be wiped off the map, leaving only these scattered, deeply buried, or incredibly resilient traces behind?
Traces that required, in some cases like the Cuban city, seemingly impossible geological forces to preserve them at such depths. The catastrophe explains the disappearance and the strange preservation.
Okay, so if the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid, were not tombs for the dynastic pharaohs, as the evidence increasingly suggests, what was their purpose in this pre-cataclysmic world? This leads us to some fascinating alternative theories about their function.
Right. And one of the most intriguing and certainly highly detailed theories comes from the engineer Christopher Dunn. He proposed the Giza power plant theory back in 1998.
A power plant, not a tomb.
Exactly. Dunn meticulously observed features of the Great Pyramid that seemed completely illogical for a tomb, but in his engineering analysis made perfect sense if the structure was designed to function as a sophisticated machine.
What specific architectural features led him to that conclusion? Can you give some examples?
Sure. Dunn pointed to several key elements. First, those precision-cut granite boxes found in the King's Chamber and elsewhere. Granite, especially rose granite with high quartz content, is piezoelectric. It generates electricity under pressure, and it resonates.
Okay, what else?
Second, the pyramid's overall acoustic properties. Dunn noted, and others have experimented with this, that certain frequencies applied within the chambers cause the entire massive granite structure to resonate powerfully. The chambers seem tuned.
And those shafts, the ones often called ventilation shafts.
Dunn argued their precise angles, smooth surfaces, and narrow openings meant they were not for air. He suggested they were likely waveguides designed to conduct or focus acoustic energy or microwaves, perhaps related to the resonant frequencies.
So his overall hypothesis was
That the pyramid was designed not as a resting place for a dead pharaoh, but as a massive machine. A machine intended to harness the Earth's natural low-frequency seismic and acoustic vibrations, what he called telluric energy. The subtle vibrations of the planet itself couple them with the pyramid's resonant frequency, amplify them, and perhaps convert that energy into a usable, focused form, maybe microwave energy beamed out through those shafts.
that's a radical idea. It requires an extremely high level of engineering capability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe greater than what we possess today in certain areas, like large-scale resonance engineering.
It absolutely does. It implies a deep understanding of physics, material science, harmonics, and acoustics that seems far beyond ancient capabilities as we understand them. But historical accounts of artifacts recovered from Giza seem to support that idea of unexpectedly advanced technology being present.
We have to remember the findings of the pioneering 19th century archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie, right? He wasn't a fringe theorist. He was the father of modern scientific Egyptology.
Exactly. And Petrie found physical evidence, actual drill cores extracted from sites like Giza, that showed the ancient builders were drilling through extremely hard stones like diorite and granite.
At speeds, and with a precision that seemed impossible for his time.
Impossible. The drill cores exhibited these regular helical grooves. The spacing of these grooves suggested a feed rate, how fast the drill advanced into the stone per revolution, that Petrie calculated would require tons of pressure, far more than could be applied by hand with simple copper tools and sand abrasive.
So how could they have done it?
Modern analysis suggests that to achieve such cuts in granite, which has a Mohs hardness of 7, second only to diamond at 10, the builders might have required technology involving maybe ultrasonic drilling, extremely high rotational speeds, immense mechanically applied pressure, and perhaps abrasives like corundum or even diamond, possibly synthesized through some lost advanced chemistry. It far exceeds the simple copper chisels and dolerite pounders usually attributed to the dynastic Old Kingdom era.
So again, this reinforces the core idea. The builders, whoever they were, possessed technical knowledge, whether in physics, resonance, material science, or advanced machining, that we are only just beginning to rediscover or replicate.
And that level of knowledge simply doesn't fit neatly into a 2500 BCE timeline. It fits much better with the idea of a lost, technologically sophisticated golden age that existed before the Great Catastrophe.
Okay, we've established this pattern. The Cuban anomaly, the astronomical alignments at Giza, the geological proof of water erosion and sea levels, the myths, they all seem to point towards a major civilization existing and then being wiped out around 12,000 years ago.
Right, or in the time of the Younger Dryas event.
But perhaps the most undeniable, scientifically dated, absolutely concrete piece of evidence for a sophisticated prehistoric civilization doesn't come from Egypt or the Caribbean depths. It comes from southeastern Turkey.
You're talking about the incredible site of Göbekli Tepe.
Exactly. Göbekli Tepe. Discovered by the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt in the 1990s, this site completely, and I mean irrevocably, upended the traditional timeline of human civilization.
It really did. What Schmidt and his team found were not simple huts, but multiple, massive circular stone enclosures. These enclosures were defined by huge, intricately carved, precisely engineered, T-shaped limestone pillars.
The complexity and the sheer organization required to build this site. It's just staggering when you think about the supposed time period, but the age is the real shockwave here.
It is dated conclusively through multiple rounds of carbon-14 dating of organic materials found in the fill used to deliberately bury the site, and through stratified archaeology, Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old.
12,000. Let's put that in stark perspective for you listening. This enormous, highly structured complex, which clearly required coordinated, massive, organized labor, advanced engineering planning, and possibly sophisticated astronomical knowledge.
It existed 7,000 years before the accepted invention of agriculture, 7 millennia before people supposedly settled down to farm.
It was 8,000 years before the invention of the wheel.
Right, and 9,000 years before the first known cities emerged in Mesopotamia, like Uruk or Eridu.
The accepted narrative, the story we were all taught, said that 12,000 years ago, humans were primitive, nomadic hunter-gatherers, living hand-to-mouth, maybe in small bands, sheltering in caves.
Supposedly incapable of this kind of large-scale, sophisticated, symbolic construction project. Yet the builders of Göbekli Tepe were clearly capable of planning complex structures, quarrying multi-ton pillars from bedrock nearby, transporting them uphill.
Some of these pillars are huge, right?
Massive. The T-pillars, some stand up to 6 meters tall, that's nearly 20 feet, and weigh up to 20 tons. And they aren't just plain stone, they're adorned with incredibly sophisticated high-relief carvings of wild animals, snakes, vultures, foxes, boars, scorpions, spiders.
And these carvings aren't just random decoration.
Many researchers believe they aren't. They seem to be arranged in specific patterns. Some have proposed that certain pillars represent astronomical constellations like Cygnus or Scorpio, perhaps marking solstice events or even depicting the Younger Dryas impact event itself, like on the famous vulture stone. It suggests a complex symbolic system, maybe even a form of proto-writing or calendrical marking.
So, Göbekli Tepe proves, beyond reasonable doubt, that advanced, organized human culture, capable of monumental architecture and complex symbolism, existed before the supposed starting point of history, long before the catastrophe.
Absolutely. The builders of Göbekli Tepe possessed the organizational structure, the engineering skill, the artistry, and potentially the astronomical knowledge of what we have to call a high culture, a culture that simply shouldn't have existed then, according to the old models.
Its existence validates the whole idea of a lost golden age, doesn't it? It provides the necessary anchor, the concrete proof, for that time period we've been discussing, around 10,000 BCE, or even earlier.
It does. And now, with Göbekli Tepe as a confirmed example, we can look at the global mystery of pyramids and other megalithic structures in a new light.
Yeah, it's astonishing when you step back and realize that pyramids, or pyramid-like structures, and massive megalithic constructions exist on virtually every continent. We see them in Egypt and Sudan, of course, but also in Mesopotamia, ziggurats, China, Mesoamerica, Mexico, Guatemala, South America, Peru, even possibly underwater remnants like off Japan or in the Caribbean.
Right. And the conventional explanation for this has always been
Independent invention. The different peoples, separated by vast oceans and millennia of time, just happen to independently come up with the same basic architectural form, the pyramid, usually for tombs or religious purposes.
That's the standard view. It emphasizes parallel cultural evolution.
But the alternative view, the one championed by researchers like Graham Hancock, synthesizes all this evidence differently, doesn't it?
It does. The alternative view is essentially a global diffusion theory, but rooted in a specific historical context, the Younger Dryas catastrophe.
Explain that theory.
It posits that survivors of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the remnants of that advanced pre-cataclysmic civilization, the one sometimes called Atlantis or by other names, scattered globally after the disaster.
They became travelers, missionaries almost.
Perhaps. They traveled to different parts of the post-catastrophe world, encountering scattered, likely traumatized, more primitive cultures that had survived. And according to this theory, these survivors shared fundamental advanced knowledge with them.
Knowledge of what?
Crucially, knowledge of astronomy, precision engineering, geometry, mathematics, and perhaps most importantly, the principles of agriculture, how to restart civilization after the collapse.
So this diffusion theory would explain the similarities.
It would explain the startling uniformity of certain architectural forms like pyramids, the shared astronomical alignment principles found worldwide, like alignments to solstices, equinoxes, or specific constellations like Orion, and it would also explain the shared global memory of a catastrophic flood and civilizing heroes arriving afterwards.
And this idea isn't just modern speculation. We find surprisingly sophisticated echoes of this in much older pre-modern accounts, don't we?
We do. We find striking parallels in, for instance, medieval Arabic sources. Historians like al-Masudi, writing in the 10th century, recorded traditions stating that the Giza pyramids were built before the Great Flood.
By whom?
By a king named Surid bin Salhuk, who is often identified with the pre-flood biblical patriarch Enoch or the Islamic prophet Idris. This king, having been warned of the impending watery disaster in a dream, supposedly constructed the pyramids specifically as repositories.
To preserve knowledge.
Exactly, to preserve scientific knowledge, astronomical records, and historical wisdom safely through the coming cataclysm. So this isn't just primitive folklore, it reads like a cultural memory of a technologically driven preservation effort using the most durable structures imaginable.
And the search for that potentially preserved knowledge continues today, right?
Right.
Because even with our most advanced modern technology, we are still finding that these ancient structures contain hidden secrets.
Absolutely. The sources highlight that stunning discovery from 2017 using muon radiography to scan the Great Pyramid.
Muon scanning. How did that work again?
Muons are high-energy subatomic particles created when cosmic rays hit the Earth's atmosphere. They constantly rain down and can pass through hundreds of meters of stone. But they lose energy or get deflected slightly depending on the density of the material they pass through.
So, by placing detectors inside or around the pyramid.
Scientists can track the paths and energies of billions of muons passing through it. By analyzing these patterns, they can create 3D images of the pyramid's internal structure, revealing differences in density, essentially, finding voids or hidden chambers, similar to how an X-ray works, but on a much larger scale.
And what did the Scan Pyramids project find inside the Great Pyramid after 4,500 years of intense scrutiny and exploration?
They discovered a massive, previously unknown void, a huge hidden chamber, at least 30 meters long, located high above the Grand Gallery. Its shape and size are similar to the Grand Gallery itself.
And it's inaccessible.
Totally inaccessible by any known passage. Its purpose remains completely unknown. But its existence proves, definitively, that even after centuries of study, we are still finding major hidden, engineered features within the Great Pyramid. Its internal architecture is far more complex than we previously realized.
That immediately begs the question, what else is still hidden inside, waiting to be found? Protected perhaps by the structure's sheer size, complexity, and maybe even intentional design.
It's a tantalizing thought. Furthermore, let's quickly revisit the sheer difficulty of constructing these monuments, especially lifting those massive blocks. This leads us back to the material science aspect.
The geopolymer concrete hypothesis.
Yes, proposed by materials chemist Joseph Daviditz. This is crucial because it offers a potential technological solution to the seemingly impossible logistical problem of moving and placing hundreds of thousands of blocks, some weighing up to 70 tons, like the granite beams in the King's Chamber.
So how does geopolymer concrete change the story from quarrying hard stone and hauling it for miles to something potentially more advanced?
Davidovitz conducted chemical and microscopic analysis of samples from the pyramid casing stones and core blocks. He argued they show characteristics inconsistent with natural quarried limestone, but very consistent with a synthetic geopolymer concrete.
Meaning they were cast, like modern concrete.
Essentially, yes. His hypothesis suggests the builders didn't necessarily carve all the blocks from distant quarries and haul them up ramps. Instead, they might have pulverized local, softer limestone, mixed it with water and reactive binders, like lime, natron, or plant ash, to create a slurry, carried this mixture up in baskets, and then poured or packed it into molds directly on the pyramid where it hardened chemically in place.
Yes, that's correct.
If correct, it implies the builders possessed a highly sophisticated lost chemical art, a form of advanced materials science. They didn't have to physically lift 70-ton solid blocks. They synthesized and poured them on site using clever chemistry, solving the immense labor and logistical problems almost instantly.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We have the impossible depth of the Cuban structures. We have the 10,500 BCE dating suggested by stellar alignments and water erosion at Giza. We have the undeniable age and sophistication of Göbekli Tepe. We have internal secrets still being revealed by muon radiography. And we have emerging evidence of potentially advanced building materials like geopolymer concrete. What does this all fundamentally mean when you add it up?
It means, I think, that a profound and essentially complete historical narrative is missing from our standard textbooks. The data points, when viewed together, relentlessly suggest a highly advanced, globally organized civilization existed during the late Paleolithic era, likely peaking before the Younger Dryas event.
And that civilization was subsequently wiped out, or at least catastrophically disrupted, by that global cataclysm around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago.
Exactly. And the structures that remain, Giza, Göbekli Tepe, maybe the Cuban anomaly, maybe others still undiscovered, they aren't simply primitive tombs or early temples of emerging hunter-gatherers or farmers. They look more like complex, precisely engineered remnants of a lost golden age.
Yeah.
Left behind perhaps as warnings or maybe even as time capsules, repositories of lost knowledge.
Just waiting for a future civilization with the right technology and maybe the right mindset to finally understand them. #tag outro. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We started this deep dive with the tantalizing, almost mythical, unresolved mystery of a massive sunken city off Cuba.
And we ended up with hard physical and astronomical evidence challenging the very foundation of the accepted timeline for the Egyptian pharaohs and the dawn of civilization itself.
For you listening, the synthesis really seems clear, doesn't it? Every key piece of hard evidence, we've looked at the geological impossibility of the Cuban depth-fitting standard timelines, the astronomical accuracy and the corresponding water erosion date locking Giza into around 10,500 BCE, and the sheer chronological anomaly of the 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe.
They all converge. They all point strongly toward the same conclusion: a collective historical amnesia, a forgetting forced upon humanity by the global catastrophic Younger Dryas event.
And the core conflict seems to remain the institutional inertia, maybe even a resistance, within mainstream science and archaeology to fully embrace a catastrophe-driven model of the history, a model that acknowledges profound discontinuities.
Right. And because of this resistance, or perhaps just the sheer difficulty and expense, crucial potential sites like the Cuban anomaly remain perpetually uninvestigated, just languishing in obscurity. And that leaves our understanding of human history, well, intentionally incomplete, perhaps.
If we accept the possibility, even just entertain it, that these incredible structures were built not just with stunning precision, but with a profound, high-level intent.
Maybe as power plants, as Kristen suggested, or as precise astronomical markers encoding warnings or knowledge, as Boval implies, or as literal repositories of knowledge to survive a cataclysm, as the ancient Arabic sources claimed.
And the stakes of investigating them properly are immense, aren't they? We're not just debating a construction date by a few thousand years.
No, we're potentially debating the entire nature and scope of human potential throughout history. We're debating whether civilization is a linear progression or something cyclical, marked by rises and catastrophic falls.
So considering the sheer complexity and precision we see in these surviving monuments, Giza, Göbekli Tepe, and the fact that we are only now, with our most advanced 21st century technology like muon radiography and sophisticated chemical analysis, just beginning to discover hidden engineered rooms and potential technological clues like the geopolymer concrete hypothesis. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Well, essential, maybe even civilization-changing knowledge might still be safely hidden, encoded, or perhaps literally stored within these ancient structures, waiting. Just waiting for a future civilization, maybe ours, maybe one after us, advanced enough and perhaps wise enough to finally read the instructions and truly learn the lessons from the catastrophe of the distant past.